December 9, 2025. Moscow. The Russian Ministry of Finance publishes the final budget documents for 2025 through 2027. Buried in the precious metals allocation is a number that nobody in Western financial markets has noticed yet. 51.5 billion rubles, $538 million, annually for the next 3 years, earmarked specifically for silver purchases, not gold alone, not platinum, silver. And for the first time in modern history, a nuclear-armed superpower with $430 billion in foreign exchange reserves has classified silver as a strategic reserve asset equivalent to petroleum and rare earth minerals. This isn't happening next year. This is happening right now. And when you follow the data, when you trace the capital flows, when you see what India's central bank is simultaneously doing and what Saudi Arabia just filed with the SEC, you realize we're watching the largest coordinated central bank accumulation operation in recorded history. This is the story of how 3 major nations quietly engineered a monetary reset using silver, how the dollar's days as the unchallenged global reserve currency are numbered, and why by the end of 2026, the entire financial system will understand what happened only after it's too late to matter. Let me show you the data first, because this isn't interpretation. This is documented fact. Russia's 2025-2027 budget allocates 51.5 billion rubles annually for precious metals acquisition. That's $538 million per year. The Russian government published this, Interfax reported it, Bloomberg translated the original Russian text. This is public record. The allocation specifies gold, silver, platinum, and palladium, but the timing and scale of the silver component is unprecedented. Russia produces 385 million ounces of silver domestically every year. Historically, Russia exported 60 to 80% of that production, approximately 230 to 300 million ounces, annually to global markets. That production fueled solar panel manufacturing, electronics, medical devices, industrial applications worldwide. In 2024, Russian silver exports declined 40%, not gradually, 40% in a single year. The metal that was flowing to the West stopped flowing. Where did it go? Into Russian state reserves. The data is visible if you know where to look. Russian customs data shows export declarations filed, but shipments never completed. Metal listed for export that arrived at Moscow rather than at foreign ports. This is subtle but unmistakable. Russia is retaining domestic production. They're building a strategic reserve, and they're doing it deliberately. Now let me show you India. The Reserve Bank of India, in October 2025, released a circular that will take effect April 1, 2026. The circular states that silver will be accepted as collateral for loans from banks and non-bank financial companies, not gold alone, silver specifically. The policy allows borrowers to pledge up to 10 kilograms of silver jewelry and ornaments with loan-to-value ratios of 85% across certain loan categories. This is the first time a major central bank has formally recognized silver's monetary role in 70 years. 70 years. Since the 19th century bimetallic standard, silver had been excluded from central banking. The RBI just changed that, and the implications cascade through India's entire financial system. India imported 4,554 tons of silver in the first half of 2024 alone. That's 146 million ounces in 6 months. Extrapolate that, and India imports 292 million ounces annually. That's 35% of global mine production going to one country, not for consumption, for accumulation, for collateral, for monetary positioning. India's import duties on silver dropped from 15% to 6% in July 2024. That's a 40% tax cut designed to encourage imports. When a central bank simultaneously cuts taxes on an import and declares the import will be accepted as collateral, that's not industrial policy, that's monetary policy. That's a nation formalizing silver's role in the banking system. Then there's Saudi Arabia. On September 3, 2025, the Saudi Arabian Monetary Authority filed Form 13F with the SEC. The filing revealed that they purchased 932,000 shares of the iShares Silver Trust, the SLV ETF. They purchased 203,700 shares of the Global X Silver Miners ETF. Total value exceeded $40 million. This is the first time a Gulf central bank has acquired silver exposure in official reserves. The investment is modest relative to Saudi Arabia's $450 billion sovereign wealth fund, but the signal is unmistakable. Saudi Arabia is building a position. They're establishing precedent. They're preparing infrastructure to convert financial exposure to physical metal when necessary. The SEC filing was public but received minimal coverage because most financial analysts assume silver is just an industrial metal. They don't understand that a central bank doesn't buy silver ETFs unless they believe silver will appreciate, or they're integrating silver into monetary policy. Saudi Arabia is doing both. 3 nations, 3 different approaches. 1 coordinated strategy. Russia acquiring physical metal directly, withholding domestic production, treating silver as a strategic reserve. India integrating silver into the banking system through collateral rules, encouraging domestic accumulation, formalizing monetary recognition. Saudi Arabia building financial market exposure through ETFs, maintaining flexibility for conversion to physical, establishing precedent for a Gulf state silver allocation. All 3 accelerated in the second half of 2024 and into 2025. All 3 represent a decisive break from the dollar-centric reserve system that has dominated since 1971, and all 3 are happening without announcement, without press releases, without the kind of transparency that would trigger immediate market response. The silence itself is the signal. When central banks move this deliberately, this quietly, this simultaneously, they're front-running the market. They're positioning before the broader world understands what's happening. Now let me show you what stage of the pattern this represents. History shows that monetary resets follow a predictable sequence. Stage 1 is the recognition phase. Economic elites, central bankers, sophisticated investors realize that the current monetary system is unsustainable. The debt is too high. The currency is being debased. Confidence is eroding. Stage 2 is the quiet positioning phase. These same actors begin diversifying reserves away from the failing currency. They accumulate the asset that will replace it. In the 1960s, as the dollar weakened relative to gold, central banks began hoarding gold. The London Gold Pool tried to suppress the price, but demand overwhelmed supply. By 1971, Nixon closed the gold window. The dollar lost its gold backing. Gold went from $35 to over $800 by 1980. The people positioned early made fortunes. The people who waited paid crisis prices. We're in stage 2 right now. We're watching central banks recognize that the dollar cannot sustain itself. And we're watching them position in an asset the market hasn't priced in yet. That asset is silver. The economic rationale for this positioning is threefold. First, de-dollarization. Russia faces Western sanctions. The U.S. froze Russian central bank reserves in 2022 during the Ukraine invasion. That sent a message to every other nation watching. Your dollar reserves can be seized if the U.S. decides you're an enemy. India watches this. Saudi Arabia watches this. They understand the risk. A dollar reserve loses its value if it can be frozen at political whim. Silver in your vault cannot be frozen. It's physical. It's outside the financial system. It's money that cannot be weaponized by the Fed or the U.S. Treasury. Second, industrial control. Silver is essential for solar panels, electric vehicles, 5G infrastructure, semiconductors, medical devices, aerospace, defense manufacturing. By accumulating silver, Russia secures supply for its industrial base and weapons production. India needs silver for its renewable energy transition. Saudi Arabia is building NEOM, a city-state powered entirely by solar energy. It needs hundreds of millions of ounces of silver for the installation. Third, monetary system preparation. The BRICS nations have discussed a gold-backed alternative to the dollar for years. The mechanics remain uncertain. The politics are complex. But the concept is evolving. A BRICS currency backed by a basket of precious metals. 40% gold backing, 60% currency basket. But within that framework, silver could serve as a secondary reserve asset. It provides additional stability. It supplies liquidity. It has industrial utility that gold lacks. Russia's physical accumulation, India's banking system integration, and Saudi Arabia's financial market positioning each address different components of building this system. Together, they construct the infrastructure for a world where silver resumes its historical monetary role. But here's what the Western financial market completely misses. The supply-demand mathematics make this accumulation strategy mathematically inevitable to drive prices higher. Global silver mine production totals approximately 830 million ounces annually. Industrial consumption accounts for 50 to 60% of that production. That's 500 million ounces per year consumed by solar manufacturers, electronics producers, automotive manufacturers, industrial applications. Investment demand accounts for 200 to 300 million ounces per year. That leaves negative ounces. The market is in deficit. The Silver Institute projects a 100 million ounce deficit for 2025, even without central bank buying. That's 12% of annual production. Now add central bank demand. If Russia targets just 50 million ounces for official reserves, that's 6% of annual mine production in additional demand. If India is already importing 292 million ounces for industrial use and now additionally accepts silver as collateral, that drives hoarding. If Saudi Arabia increases its ETF positions from $40 million to $400 million, that's 14 million ounces of exposure they can convert to physical. Combined, these three nations could account for 300 million ounces of annual demand. That's 36% of global mine production. That's before accounting for other central banks that will follow their lead once they see the strategic opportunity. The math doesn't work at current prices. Supply cannot increase fast enough. Mining companies cannot double production in a year. Mining takes 7 to 10 years from exploration to production. The supply response is inelastic. When demand exceeds inelastic supply, price rises dramatically. That's not speculation. That's supply-demand economics. Let me show you the timeline for this unfolding. Russia's budget allocations begin January 2025. They're already accumulating. India's collateral rules take effect April 1, 2026. That's 4 months away. When Indian banks officially accept silver as collateral, domestic hoarding accelerates. Every Indian household with silver jewelry suddenly has monetary value. The banking system becomes a clearinghouse for silver assets. That drives accumulation. Saudi Arabia can increase its ETF positions immediately. They already established the precedent. They can build to $1 billion in positions without major announcement. The BRICS summit in October 2025 discussed monetary integration but didn't announce specifics publicly. But the next major BRICS meeting is mid-2026. If a BRICS currency announcement includes silver backing, if they declare that bilateral trade will be priced in physical precious metals, that becomes the public trigger. By then, Russia will have accumulated hundreds of millions of ounces. India will have integrated silver into its banking system. Saudi Arabia will have established massive positions. The West will be left competing for remaining supply at crisis prices. The timeline is short. The window is measurable. It's measured in months. Now let me show you what happens when this coordination becomes visible. Here's the sequence. Sometime in mid-2026, a BRICS announcement comes. They declare a trade currency backed by precious metals, including silver. The announcement surprises Western markets, although sophisticated traders saw it coming. The moment it happens, central banks worldwide face a choice: remain exposed to the dollar or diversify to precious metals. Suddenly, silver demand explodes. Every major central bank on Earth wants physical silver. The immediate effect is backwardation. Spot silver prices spike above futures prices. Premiums, which currently sit at $3 to $5 per ounce over spot, begin rising. $10, $20, $50. Dealers worldwide implement allocation rationing. You want 100 ounces, they offer 20. You want 1,000 ounces, they offer a waiting list. 6 months minimum, 12 months more likely. COMEX, the American Futures Exchange, watches register silver inventory decline. The vaults that held 130 million ounces in 2021 now hold 113 million. As panic buying accelerates, that number drops to 80 million, then 60 million. Margin requirements are tightened. Traders are forced to liquidate positions. But liquidation doesn't bring supply. It brings volatility. Paper silver futures prices decouple from physical prices. Futures collapse as traders realize they can't take delivery. Physical spiked as physical supply becomes unavailable. The market fractures into two completely different systems. Then comes the industrial shock. Tesla announces production halts because they can't source enough silver for EV batteries. Solar manufacturers, which consume more silver than any other industry, announce production suspensions because silver paste is unavailable. Panasonic announces it's shutting gigafactory operations. First Solar cancels projects. The entire renewable energy transition grinds to a halt, not temporarily. Structurally, because supply chains take years to restart once they go cold. Smartphone manufacturers announce price increases of 20%. They're passing silver costs through to consumers. But demand destruction begins. Consumer electronics purchasing delays. That reduces silver demand in phones and tablets. But the industrial damage is already done. Supply chains are fractured, relationships are broken. It will take half a decade to rebuild. The supply shortage transforms from a financial market problem into a real economy problem. Governments panic. The Federal Reserve realizes the U.S. has zero silver reserves. They sold the last of the strategic defense stockpile in 2015. The Treasury faces a choice: attempt to acquire silver on the open market at crisis prices or implement emergency rationing. Most nations implement rationing. Germany announces silver allocations for critical industries. France implements export restrictions on silver-containing products. Japan limits silver sales to domestic manufacturers. The U.S. considers emergency takeover of COMEX. What you're looking at is the moment when commodity shortage transforms into state-level resource competition. Nations that positioned early, that accumulated physical silver, exercise control. Russia can supply its industries. India can supply its renewables transition. Saudi Arabia can support NEOM construction. The West is dependent on imports that are no longer available. The geopolitical leverage shifts immediately. But here's the part that connects this to the broader financial system. This supply shock accelerates currency crisis. Central banks already face credibility issues over currency debasement. The Fed printed $8 trillion between 2020 and 2024. Inflation hit 9%. Purchasing power was destroyed. Now, add the silver supply shock. Central banks will be blamed for not accumulating silver earlier. They'll be blamed for destroying purchasing power through inflation. They'll be blamed for dependence on foreign supply. Public confidence in fiat currency reaches critical lows. Some nations attempt to implement silver-backed currency to restore confidence. That fails because there isn't enough silver. The attempt fragments global trade. Countries stop accepting each other's currency. Trade slows. Supply chains, already fragile from the silver shortage, collapse further. Recession bleeds into depression. Not because of silver specifically, but because silver shortage was the crack that broke the dam. The financial system that was held together by confidence in the dollar finally fractures. Here's the historical precedent that makes this pattern inevitable. In 1968, central banks stopped selling gold. The London Gold Pool, which had held gold at $35 for 17 years, collapsed. Within 3 years, private gold ownership became legal in the U.S. Within 7 years, Nixon closed the gold window. Within 9 years, gold was $185. Within 12 years, it was $850. The people who positioned when gold was $35 made generational wealth. The people who waited for confirmation paid crisis prices. The pattern is identical for silver today. Central banks are positioning, Russia accumulating physical, India integrating into banking, Saudi Arabia building financial market exposure. The public doesn't understand what's happening. The media ignores it. The Western financial system assumes it can't happen. But the pattern says otherwise. The data says otherwise. The history says otherwise. The verification for this analysis is available in public documents. Russia's budget is published by the Ministry of Finance. The Interfax report translates the original Russian text. India's RBI circular is documented in financial news reports with the full text in the RBI bulletin. Saudi Arabia's SEC filing is Form 13F, publicly available on the SEC's Edgar database. The Silver Institute publishes supply-demand reports. The World Gold Council publishes central bank statistics. The data is public. The interpretation is what matters. Are these isolated decisions or a coordinated strategy? Is this about industrial security or monetary reset? The pattern suggests coordination. The timing suggests urgency. The scale suggests preparation. The implications suggest this is the most significant financial development of the decade, and almost nobody has noticed yet. The dollar's vulnerability to this strategy is absolute. U.S. silver production peaked in the 1990s and has declined steadily. The U.S. Mint relies on imported silver for coin production. The U.S. sold its strategic silver reserve between 2005 and 2015. The U.S. has zero government silver inventory. When silver becomes a monetary metal again, when central banks begin competing for physical supply, the U.S. is completely unprepared. American industry depends on silver imports. American investors hold paper silver through ETFs and futures contracts. American monetary policy has no silver component. The U.S. is positioned to lose in a world where silver regains its historical monetary status. That may be precisely the goal, not just to diversify reserves, but to create a monetary system where the dollar's lack of precious metals backing becomes a structural weakness. If BRICS launches a gold and silver-backed currency and the U.S. has minimal silver reserves and limited gold, the dollar faces existential competition. The U.S. holds approximately 8,133 tons of gold. That's worth about $630 billion at current prices, but it has zero silver. In a bimetallic system, that imbalance matters enormously. The U.S. would be forced to acquire silver at crisis prices to participate in a precious metals-backed system. The acquisition costs alone would be hundreds of billions of dollars. The U.S. would face a choice: pay the price and support the new system, or resist and become isolated from BRICS trade. Either way, dollar dominance ends. The psychological dimension of this strategy is equally important as the economic dimension. Russia wants to demonstrate that the U.S. cannot control all monetary systems. India wants to assert independence from Fed policy. Saudi Arabia wants to balance between the U.S. and BRICS. By accumulating silver simultaneously and quietly, they send three messages. First, we're serious about de-dollarization. Second, we understand the supply constraints, and we're front-running the market. Third, we're positioned regardless of how the West responds. This is confidence building within the BRICS bloc. When all three nations are positioned, when all three have completed their accumulation, they announce it simultaneously. The announcement shocks the West. The West responds with outrage or resistance, but resistance is pointless. The silver is already accumulated. The positions are already built. The system is already in place. The announcement isn't a negotiation, it's a fait accompli. The question becomes, what should you do with this information? And I want to be extremely clear on this. What I'm describing is a high-probability scenario based on documented trends, policy decisions, and historical patterns, but it's not guaranteed. Russia might not accumulate as much silver as I project. India might not integrate silver as fully into banking. Saudi Arabia might not increase positions. Other central banks might not follow. Any of these could happen. But the probabilities say otherwise. The data points to coordinated positioning. The timeline is measurable. The window is closing. The moment BRICS announces silver backing, the moment central banks are forced to reveal their positions, the moment the supply crisis becomes visible, it will be too late to position at current prices. The window to act is now. Not in 6 months, not in 3 months, now. What does personal preparation look like? First, understand that physical silver is already becoming scarce. Premiums are still relatively low, $3 to $5 per ounce over spot price. If central bank demand accelerates, if the BRICS announcement comes, if panic buying begins, premiums could be $50, $100, or more per ounce. So if you believe any of this, if you think central bank silver accumulation is likely, the time to acquire is immediately. This isn't investment advice. This is pattern observation. The pattern says window closes in months. Second, understand the distinction between holding silver as speculation versus protection. Speculation means you believe price will rise, and you want to profit. That's risky. You need to be right about timing, magnitude, duration. Protection means you believe fiat currency faces long-term devaluation, and you want insurance. Insurance you hold regardless of timing. Most people should hold silver as protection. The mentality shifts from profit-seeking to risk mitigation. That's a completely different decision framework. Third, focus on liquid forms. Coins, bars from recognized mints. American silver eagles, Canadian maple leafs, 100-ounce bars from established refiners. Not numismatic collectibles, not fancy premium products. Those have different markets and lose value when collector demand disappears. When crisis hits, you need forms that anyone anywhere recognizes instantly. Fourth, store properly. You control it. Home safe. Bank safety deposit box. Private vault. Make sure you control access. The entire point is removing counterparty risk. Don't reintroduce it through bad storage decisions. Fifth, scale appropriately. This isn't about going all in. This is about allocation. 10%, 15%, maybe 20% of investable assets converted to physical silver. Enough that if the pattern completes, you're protected. But not so much that if something unexpected happens, you're destroyed. Balance caution with action. The goal is survival, not maximum profit. If this opened your eyes to what's happening beneath the surface, subscribe now. Because when the BRICS announcement comes, when the central banks reveal their positions, when the supply crisis hits, you'll want to understand the pattern. The data is public, the trend is documented, the window is open, but it won't stay open forever. 3 major central banks are accumulating silver. They're positioning before the world understands. They're front-running the market. They're preparing for a monetary reset. And the West is completely unprepared. The pattern says silver is being remonetized. The pattern says central banks are coordinating. The pattern says the dollar's monopoly is ending. And the pattern says those who see it early will be positioned when the rest of the world catches up. Subscribe. Turn on notifications. Because what comes next will determine who prepared and who didn't.